Hi, my name is Jaycee Choi, and I am a Jungian Typology enthusiast as well as an Enneagram enthusiast. I also have a series on productivity going around right now, but today's episode of ENTP Time is on cognitive functions and what they are as a whole, I guess. I realized that I dove into every single one of the types, but if you're more of like a newcomer, then you might have no idea what I'm talking about. The extent of your knowledge might just be like extrovert versus introvert, or sensor versus, intuition user, or whatever. Like you might not know like what I'm even talking about when I'm talking about these cognitive functions. So I realized I should have done this like before I released my 8 videos on the 8 cognitive functions, but better late than never. And also I was carrying my tea to my room and I sneezed and then I spilled some of it on my hand, so that happened, but whatever. Sorry, kind of long intro, but yeah, so again, just to reiterate, today's episode is on what are the cognitive functions. And to begin with, I'm going to start off with saying that I'm going to be talking about the Myers-Briggs type indicator model in this episode, rather than like socionics, because it gets a lot more complicated as you dive further into cognitive functions and typology. But the more like basic, easier, more simpler model is the MBTI, and essentially there are the 16 personality types, as you probably know. There's like, the INTP, the ENFP or whatever, ESTP, like you have all these, ENFJ, whatever, just to give some judges the love. But you might know about those and like the stereotypes, but essentially like in that model, it's incredibly limiting just because it's so focused on like dichotomies, where it's like you're either an extrovert or you're an introvert. And I hear from a lot of people, they're like, well, I mean, sometimes I feel like I'm neither, or I'm both, or like, like people assume that if you're a thinker, you're smart, and if you're a feeler, you're not. You're just like, all you do is feel, which is not right. So to dive more into cognitive functions, it helps you to basically resolve this issue by like assigning you more than one thing. So I'll describe this better. So essentially there are the perceiving functions, which are the ones that are the second letter. So it would be the N and the S types, right? So like ENTP, if you look at the N, that's the perceiving function, and then the T is the judging function. So things that fall into the second slot are perceiving functions, and things that fall into the third slot are the judging functions. So essentially me as an ENTP, I have 4 valued functions. The first one is extroverted intuition, so that's a perceiving function. And then I have introverted thinking, which is a judging function. And then I have extroverted feeling, which is a judging function. And then I have introverted sensing, which is a perceiving function. And they go in that order. So essentially there are those 4 cognitive functions, and they're either oriented inward or outward. And then you have a combination of 4 of these that you value. So everyone has 2 internal functions and 2 external functions, which makes sense because when you're, processing information, or when you're thinking deeply about things, like you use different functions than when you're interacting with other people, and the function you use to like pick up on information around you, so perceiving functions, are very different than the ones that you use to like, internalize and to think deeply and judge on certain things. So I could make a video later on in the future to tell you exactly how to figure out what your cognitive function stack is for your type. But essentially, to make it a little bit simpler, maybe I could just talk about each dominant function for each of the types. So for ENTPs and ENFPs, their dominant function is extroverted intuition, so NE. So if you have watched that video or have not, then you should go ahead and watch it and see if you resonate with this description. It's also the second function for INFPs and INTPs. So again, go ahead and check out that video or other information on extroverted intuition. Next, there is INTP and ISTPs, and their first function is introverted thinking, or TI. This is also the second function for ENTPs as well as ESTPs, so go ahead and look into that. And then there are ESFJs and ENFJs, who their first function is extroverted feeling, FE, and INFJs and ISFJs, that's their second function. And then finally there's ISTJs and ISFJs, where their first function is introverted sensing, or SI, and ESFJs and ESTJs, that's their second function. And then there is INFJs and INTJs, where their first function is introverted intuition, NI. And then ENFJs and ENTJs, that's their second function. And then there is ESTJs, ENTJs, where their first function is extroverted thinking, TE. Again, I have videos on all of these that outline like what this first function kind of looks like. And after that one, there is also ESTPs and ESFPs, where their first function is extroverted sensing, SE. And then finally, the last one, there are INFPs and ISFPs, where their first function is introverted feeling. So those are like the 8 cognitive functions that come first. So for each, since there are 8 of them and there are 16 types, there are 2 different types that each have the same dominant function. And I know I described it kind of confusingly. I'm going to put in the description below like every single one of the types and the order of like their stacks, but essentially like it's the way that like people interact and collect information and judge what to do with it. So if you have more questions, then go ahead and ask. This was kind of like a chaotic video. I know for some of them I said which ones were like the second function and some I didn't, but I will write it all down in the description so you don't have to worry so much. So if you happen to know what your like type is, maybe look up the cognitive functions that align with it and see if you relate with them. And just like as a rule of thumb, generally like your inferior function, your fourth function, is like a lot weaker than your first 3. So it like you might not like resonate with the stereotypes of like a high SI user if you're an NE dominant or whatever, you know, because it's like your lowest function or whatever. So go ahead and look at some descriptions. If you have questions, go ahead and leave a comment or, I don't know, DM me or something. But yeah, thanks for joining me on this episode, and I will see you next time.